Have some people still here. So welcome to this training session on towards a monitoring system for the UN Decade of Sustainable Transport. So my name is Johanna Siliakus. I work as a consultant for ADB's Transport Sector Office, and I will be moderating today's session. So the UN Decade of Sustainable Transport provides a framework for countries to accelerate progress towards safer, low carbon and accessible mobility. A robust monitoring system is essential to track progress, identify gaps, and support peer learning. Today's session will explore national needs, institutional challenges, and ways to close data gaps. So we'll begin with some scene-setting presentations, sharing different regional and global experiences on monitoring and tracking. And those presentations will be followed by a World Cafe type of group discussion where participants will rotate across tables to share perspectives. So the goal is to generate practical input for the development of the decade's monitoring system. Okay, so let's get started with our presentation. So we have first a scene-setting presentation by Ms. Astra Bonini, Chief of the Integrated Policy Analysis Branch at UNDESA. So Astra will provide the global framing of the UN Decade and introduce the latest thinking on the monitoring framework. Thank you, Astra.
Thank you, Johanna, and really good to see everyone. This is the final day of the forum, and time to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit on looking forward to the decade. I'm really glad to be part of this particular discussion that gets to the heart of how we implement the UN Decade of Sustainable Transport. And the really key question, how will we monitor progress? Not just in a narrow technical sense, but in terms of need and impact. Answering questions like, how will we know where efforts are needed most? How will we know whether policies and investments are having the intended effects? How will we spot unexpected externalities or potential synergies we should lean into? And just as importantly, how can we know who might be at risk of being left behind and how to better reach them? In this framing, monitoring the decade is not a simple and straightforward task. The decade is not a single program with a single output. The implementation plan outlines 6 focus areas and a number of areas involving the means of implementation, and all of these are interconnected. The decade is about how transport is situated inside complex development systems that connect economic opportunity, social inclusion, safety and health, and environmental outcomes. When the General Assembly proclaimed the first ever UN Decade of Sustainable Transport to start in 2026, the signal was clear. Transport is a fundamental enabler of sustainable development across economic, social, and environmental dimensions. And the decade's implementation plan gives us a helpful roadmap through that complexity, spanning all modes of transport, both passenger and freight, and it lays out key areas for action, from access and connectivity to decarbonization, safety, and innovation. But now that the clock is ticking on delivering on this implementation plan, we're moving from the planning stage to showing results. And we come to a very practical question. How do we know that we're making progress? Last fall, just before the decade launched, member states requested that UNDESA, together with their UN regional commissions and all relevant partners, advance work on tracking and tracing progress over the decade. And that's why this training matters. It's giving us a space to surface some of the ideas and approaches that can contribute to that effort, and to make sure that we're not starting from scratch. There's so much good work already taking place, and the mandate requests to build on what already exists. Existing tools, existing partnerships, reporting processes, and analytical work. And we're definitely not short on material. This has come out through all of the discussions this week. There's a wealth of data and indicator work across transport and across the broader sustainable development landscape. Just yesterday, I had the privilege of seeing how the Asian Transport Observatory has aligned a set of indicators against the 6 focus areas of the implementation plan. And it's an interactive platform that's really impressive in terms of what it can show to decision makers. So the challenge ahead is not to duplicate the many initiatives that are out there, but to connect them, to bring them together in a coherent and more strategic way so that we're linking transport initiatives to the broader sustainable development landscape of goals. Indicators and data are essential. This is clear. We need to be able to quantify what is happening and see where the progress is. With the SDGs, we already have a strong foundation of intergovernmentally agreed global framework of indicators. Several of the SDGs already capture critical aspects of sustainable transport. And just to name a few, we have SDG 3.6.1, the death rate due to road traffic injuries. SDG 9.1.1, the proportion of the rural population living within 2 kilometers of an all-season road. 11.2.1, access to public transport, and this is disaggregated by sex, age, and persons with disabilities. 9.1.2, which looks at passenger and freight volumes by mode, and 16.1.4, the proportion of people who feel safe walking home alone in the dark. These are the core examples that can give us traction for the decade, but the decade also gives space to think about moving beyond core transport indicators to outcome indicators, where we can track transport's contribution to the wider SDG impacts. For example, SDG 1.4.1 measures access to basic services. Transport infrastructure can help enable that access. 13.2.2 measures total greenhouse gas emissions. Transport and movement toward low-emission transport could have a major impact in this area. There are indicators on air quality, and so on and so forth. 234 unique indicators. But importantly, monitoring is also about more than indicators. It includes reports and analytical work that help us understand causal pathways. What is driving change? What is slowing it down? And what conditions make interventions succeed? It includes knowledge products and platforms for dialogue. And the resolution that was agreed by the General Assembly last fall has some specific requests. A midterm review in terms of a third global sustainable transport conference, reports from the Secretary General updating on progress to delivering on the decade, coming in at the midterm and the final year of the decade. It requests an atlas of sustainable transport, compiling many of the different resources, updates on the voluntary commitments, and so on and so forth. So looking ahead, our collective task is to shape a monitoring framework that is both practical and impactful, and that draws from the many initiatives that are already underway. If we get monitoring right, we won't just measure activity. We'll be able to show what's changing in people's lives in terms of access, safety, cleaner air, better connectivity, and more equitable outcomes. And that's the kind of progress story we should be able to tell at the end of the decade and improve throughout the decade. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Astra, and thanks for reminding us why we're actually here and doing this. So improving people's lives is the real kind of end goal here. And thanks as well for highlighting the importance of discussing and developing a monitoring framework for this, and also on building on existing work that exists, and we'll hear more about this existing work in just a bit. So our next speaker is Ms. Katrin Luger. She's Chief of the Transport Division at UN ESCAP. Katrin will share on the regional perspective, including how ESCAP is supporting countries in strengthening monitoring and data systems. So over to you, Katrin. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And for the 6th time in 4 days, thank you very much to the organizers for having me up here on stage and giving me the opportunity to fly the flag of Asia and the Pacific on behalf of the UN. So I have the pleasure of talking a little bit about how we view the decade in this part of the world. So I think it's no exaggeration if I say that Asia and the Pacific is central to the success of the decade. We host about 60% of the world's population and cover 40% of the land mass. God. So that also means that progress in sustainable transport in this region is on the critical path for progress in sustainable transport across the world. Or simply put, if we cannot achieve sustainable transport in Asia and the Pacific, we will not deliver on the objectives of the Agenda 2030. The region faces some of the world's largest sustainable transport challenges, and you have some numbers here on the slide. We now account for more than 40% of global transport-related CO2 emissions, and these emissions have actually doubled over the last 25 years, and unfortunately, they're expected to double again in the next 25 years. So this creates quite a dual challenge for the region. On the one hand, countries need to decarbonize their transport systems and transition towards cleaner, more inclusive, safer mobility. On the other hand, though, many countries are still working to close major connectivity and accessibility gaps, and that's particularly true for least developed or developing and geographically vulnerable areas. So that means that sustainable transport in this part of the world is not only about climate action, it's very closely linked to economic development, regional connectivity, social inclusion, and general access to economic growth and opportunities. And so that is why it is of crucial importance to tailor how we implement the decade to this part of the world. So we have used the last year when the global implementation plan for the decade was developed, not only, of course, to contribute to the global implementation plan and to shaping its form and substance, but also to consult with our member states and make sure that their voices are heard. And these consultations have actually shown us that, not surprisingly, given this huge economic and cultural diversity of the region, the starting points for the decade and the starting points for sustainable transport are vastly different. Countries have shown us different stages of economic development, different priorities, capacities, challenges. So there is no one-size-fits-all pathway for the implementation of the decade. Let me give you one example. In the middle of last year, we brought 25 member states together in Bangkok to what is now known as the Bangkok Consultations on the Decade. And we talked about one of the 6 focus areas of the implementation plan, which is the ensuring access to sustainable transport for all. So you have very developed countries like Japan who focus on inclusivity in public transport systems and gender mainstreaming when they talk about this dimension, whereas many developing countries in the region interpreted this priority completely differently. They looked at it through the lens of basic accessibility, connectivity, and closing gaps in transport infrastructure and services. So you can see that there's decades of development in sustainable transport between these two viewpoints. So ESCAP is hoping to play an important role in translating global frameworks into the needs of the region, identify implementation and capacity gaps, and develop costed implementation plans. We've talked a lot about that yesterday, ultimately yielding bankable projects and then connecting those projects with development financing and technical cooperation opportunities. For those of you who have listened to me yesterday, forgive me for citing the example again of how we're supporting a country in Central Asia in currently drafting their transport chapter for their NDC 3.0. During that work, we are able to really shape their priorities and already bring development partners with us this early in the process. And so that way we ensure that we not only have tailored objectives for the country, but also a pathway to implementation. I've mentioned another example from Lao PDR and Luang Prabang, where we're supporting the preparation of a bankable e-bus project, which is now confirmed to be funded by 2 international donors, and this will introduce the city's first electric public transport system. So only if we link the policy work through costed plan with the development partners and the financing can we really ensure that the decade delivers tangible and tailored impact in the region. So this session is focused on monitoring. So I think we all agree that it's not only important for tracking progress of the decade at large, but also for identifying implementation gaps and supporting better policy and investment decisions. Many countries now have targets and objectives in some shape or form, but there is a gap when it comes to the financing and the implementation. So this is just a short overview of some of the mechanisms that we have, and I agree with Astra 100% when she said that there is a lot of data and there's a lot of monitoring out there already, so we do not need to reinvent all of that, but we need to make sure that it is directly linked to our work and that it allows us to measure impact on the ground and not just, forgive me the remark, the amount of paper that we produce. So some of the examples are up here. The Review of Developments in Transport in Asia Pacific is our flagship publication. It will come out, next edition will come out in November this year, and it will examine sustainable transport technologies and innovations for the next decade. And of course, it is trying to align itself with the Decade for Sustainable Transport. We have I mentioned before, we're the largest inclusive intergovernmental platform in Asia and the Pacific, and as such, through our Committee on Transport and 3 intergovernmental agreements, every 2 years we convene our member states to make sure they're aligned on their transport priorities. We run a number of regional policy dialogues and technical cooperation initiatives. Many of you here are familiar with one of the most well-known ones, which is the Asia-Pacific Initiative on Electric Mobility. And ADB was actually part of a very large knowledge-sharing effort at the end of last year that brought together, 160 participants or something. So this is really an opportunity to showcase our work. We are not short of regional indicators and tools either, but I think we'll hear from the colleagues of ATO later who are much better at doing that than us. We will tailor, and in line with what I said before, we will tailor our work or our monitoring to really measure the direct impact of our work. So what we're not going to do is to measure the global impact of the decade. It is neither our job nor our capability. The last thing I will leave you with is we'll have a chance to talk more about the decade at the end of this year when we have our ministerial conference on transport. We will bring ministers, transport ministers from 53 member states to Bangkok. We only do that every 5 years. And of course, the decade will play a key role. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Katrin, for highlighting the role of ESCAP as well in coordinating and managing ongoing dialogue on these topics and other relevant topics in the region, as well as to also highlighting the diversity of this region and that no size fits all solutions are not applicable, obviously. Yes, so there's really like very important to start creating data and implementable pathways that are country specific and suitable for the country contexts. So let's now move on to our next presenter. So I will invite Carly Gilbert-Patrick, Secretary General of SLOCAT, to present on SLOCAT's related monitoring work and how it contributes to global and regional efforts.
Okay, great to be here with those of us who've made it through and still standing on the last day. Well done. So I want to talk to you a bit about the conversations we've been having in partnership with the UN agencies and the regional commissions and our group of sort of non-government partners, and the recommendations we're hearing from our network, and what our plans are to basically make the monitoring of the decade a reality. So for those of you who've heard me talk the last few days, you'll know that we're a partnership organisation, and we basically see ourselves as like a collaborative engine and an implementation enabler. So we're not there sort of giving technical assistance at country level, but our partners, which are like over 100 organisations, are doing that. And we try and bring everyone together and make sure that there's some cohesiveness in the sort of messaging and the asks and the training and the knowledge development that's happening in the crossover between transport and climate and sustainable development. And across our membership, we represent every region, we represent transport, energy, health, rural access, freight, logistics, people transport. So we see ourselves as our role is really in that sort of convening and coordination power. Many of the multilateral development banks and the UN agencies are also partners of SLOCAT. So we see this as an opportunity, the decade, to move beyond the sort of technical monitoring and progress tracking that's already happening, and using the decade as a sort of advocacy tool and framework that can really bring together what's happening in all the different regions and showcase that at the global level. So with regards, and we've heard a lot about, there's a lot of existing work out there. You know, there's already a lot of thinking that's gone in to how and what to track. So, for example, Some for All did a fantastic sustainable transport by numbers, tracking the global progress report, and they've broken it down by different focus areas, which align with the decade. And basically that's an in-depth piece of work that already says these are the things that we should be tracking for the decade. More recently, GIZ developed Tracking Global Progress on Cleaner Transport, and what they've done is looked at the declaration that came out of the last COP, where 11 countries said we're going to cut transport energy demand by 25% and shift to 1/3 sustainables by 2035. So what GIZ have done is said, how can we track and monitor that change? So SLOCAT and GIZ are the sort of secretariat for that declaration. So we're working with the chair, which is now Dominican Republic, to bring in more countries to sign up to that declaration and have that consultation on now how we start tracking that. And again, this is something that we can place. It doesn't have to be standalone anymore. It can be integrated. Then as SLOCAT, we also have this flagship, what I call our one-stop hub for data and trends. It's our Climate and Sustainability Global Status Report. The last issue came out in 2025. The next one will be next year. And we commit to using that as a core accountability tool for the UN decade. So in the next one that comes out next year, we want to shape that and report on progress against the decade. And that gives us a chance, whatever we come up with to monitor the decade, we can also bring in what other organisations are doing, and we can bring in what the UN commissions are tracking, and we will showcase all of that in this global status report. Underneath the global status report is something we call TrackB, and it basically is the data platform which is available online for everyone, and it has 100 plus indicators that we've been collecting since it's data from 1950s. I personally, just to be for the record, was not collecting the data, you know, I'm not that old, but it's there and it's available, and we're in the process of bringing that all onto the Transport Data Commons, which you're going to hear about, which is very much about quality data and making high quality data accessible, so you can access it through TrackB or through the Transport Data Commons. So this, again, this is a platform that already exists that's collecting all this data. Then we have really good examples at a regional level. You're going to hear about the Asian Transport Observatory shortly. And then at our last count as SLOCAT, there were at least 8 different NDC and SDG trackers, stock takes and outlooks, right? Partnership for Active Travel and Health looks just at the NDCs from the perspective of walking and cycling. UN Habitat did one for urban. There's the Sustainable Development Goal report. So the question is, under the umbrella of the decade, can we start bringing some of this stuff together? And that's what I just see as this fantastic opportunity for the decade, right? It's us as a community that have to make something of it. The UN has done the hard work of bringing it under one implementation plan, and now we can use that umbrella to work better together. So we've been having a number of consultations over since the decade was launched, about how do we monitor. And the recommendations we're getting from the partnership is, we've heard this before, we need to leverage but not duplicate the existing ecosystem. We have to have some added value. We need to use the decade to showcase political ambition and progress and impact, make sure it's multi-stakeholder. And we feel quite strongly that we need a guiding North Star. We need a global transport goal and unified targets that sort of give the decade teeth that we can monitor against. It needs to be regionally flexible so that there can be, a way to account for different priorities. And we, in parallel, need to invest in this sort of really reliable, regularly updated and transparent data. There were some ideas on what should be measured, including the enabling environment. So it's good to say this country has now moved to investing in walking and cycling, but what policies, measures and regulations did they put in place in order to get to that point? And that's what other countries want to know and learn from. Investment flows, make sure it's outcome focused, and use the existing decade commitment tracker. So make sure all those commitments are integrated into this monitoring platform. So we're just starting a consultation for what this global goal and target development. We pick from what's already there, but we need to choose 5 or 10 things that we're going to monitor as SLOCAT. So we're starting with our advocacy task force, and we invite you all to be involved in that. And we hope to launch a draft global goal and monitoring process at the next COP. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carly, for this really insightful presentation on all the reports, trackers, databases that are available already. So it's clear that we need to really orchestrate these to maximize the value of them. And thanks also for highlighting this. I think it was an interesting point on finding kind of unified targets as well for the decade. So that's an interesting target moving ahead. So moving along to our next presentation. So we have Avinash Dwivedi from WRI India, where he works as the Executive Program Director for Integrated Transport, Clean Air and Hydrogen. So Avinash will share insights from WRI's SHIFT initiative in India, focusing on monitoring approaches and lessons learned. So now we're moving already to very specific cases, so what is being done on the ground. So thank you. Over to you, Avinash.
Hello, and good morning all. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing team for having me here and talk about this initiative that we have recently started working on. We have, from all the previous speakers, we have listened like why it is important to monitor, what needs to be monitored. So basically, cities cannot manage what they can't measure and basically talk about. We talked about like no size fits all. So we might have a solution that works quite well in one particular city, but it is not a guaranteed solution for other city. So it is very important to first of all understand like what we are trying to measure, what we are trying to achieve, and how to achieve. So co-creating the solution. These are some of the indicators already like the previous speakers have covered. So in terms of accessibility, accidents and emissions, where we are today, and how can we improve further on this. So this our initiative, which we are calling as a SHIFT Transport Initiative. It is a collaborative initiative for better decision making through a data-driven and evidence-based approach. So primarily what we are trying to say is how city we can improve collaboratively and in a data-driven manner. So this is not a data repository that we are trying to create, but how to enable the ecosystem or empower the ecosystem so that the decisions that are happening on ground are data-driven and evidence-based. There are three primary components to this initiative. One is the product, people, and partnership. In terms of product, Transport Analytics Hub is the product that we are currently developing with the primary objective of democratizing the analytics. So with this, what we are trying to achieve is we are going to create an analytical tools, an open source tool, which will be available at the for the ecosystem stakeholders to use it, to adapt it. So primarily what we are saying here is this analytical tools, they are ready to adapt to a city specific scenario. People can use it to just measure and sort of infer like what's happening. There are different indicators which are bucket in the demand, supply, and performance indicators framework that I'll be talking about, and then comes the immersive experience. So this is where I talked about like people should come together and talk about like what are the challenges, how we can solve it. So this immersive experience is the part of it where it is like inside a hall, like can we bring all the stakeholders together, right? From policymakers, decision makers, to experts, to academics, to community people, to in a single room, under a roof, to understand like what are the challenges, how to improve, how to move ahead with this. So that is what the immersive experience part of it. And then from there on, how to have a local action with a local ownership. So that is what the third pillar or the third component of partnership. The key objectives of Shift Transport is to improve the vocabulary and observability of mobility patterns, and then a system diagnosis where like how to to understand the structural problems that are influencing the city's mobility and co-creating the innovative solutions to enable systems change. This is the mobility framework that I was referring to, the origin, demand, supply, and the performance. I'm not going to get into the details of it as we all are aware of it. So few examples of different indicators that can be tracked. So in terms of public transport access, if you look to the city of Bangalore, it has 471 public buses per million people, but still currently only 65% of the Bangalore's population have access to public transport. They have a plan of augmenting the metro network, but even after that, by 2031, when all the metro network will be in place, still 24% of the population of Bangalore will not be having a public transport service within 30 minutes from the point of origin. So that's like, it will help us in understanding which all areas are not having access to public transport. Similarly, if I talk about the active mobility case, the Bangalore, only 5% of Bangalore's road network is suitable for safe cycling, and only 22% of Delhi's road network is suitable for safe walking. So here the idea is, as I've mentioned, these are the frameworks. It can be adapted from what is the definition of access to public transport. So we are saying at least one service in 30 minutes. If cities wants to play around, they want to change any of the weightages, parameters, they can do it using these tools. Similarly goes for the walking also, like what's the weightage for the gradient, what's the weightage for the others, they can play around with this. In terms of other indicators, like how Jakarta moves, if we see almost only more than 60% of the trips, the modal share is of two-wheelers. What is the average trip length? So you can see here. In terms of safety, this is the snapshot for the city of Mumbai, where almost 13% of the crashes that happens, those are fatal crashes. And 87% of this is on account of overspeeding. Then in terms of the electrification, so the Delhi, what is the current electrification? Now, if we put all these things together, so say for example, the modal share of Delhi with the average trip length of Delhi and the electrification, so we can assess like what is the emission per vehicle kilometers, passenger kilometers, and we can identify where to intervene, so that there is a low sort of intervention but highest impact. So the decisions can happen basis this. Where we are and where we want to move with it is, so currently we have 30 cities where it is like 20 Indian and 10 global. In terms of analytical tools, we have access active mobility and public transport suite, which sort of do the analysis around the indicators. Where we want to move is to strengthen the analytics capabilities, like more and more indicators, more and more tools and frameworks to be added. And then how can we use deeper analytics and generative AI to make it more intuitive for the users and to test out different what-if scenarios. I'm running. So this is an example of an immersive experience that we did in Bangalore. So this is what I was referring to. Under one roof, in one room, all the different stakeholders. So we'll put up like all the analytics that we have done so that people can come, can experience like how my city moves. What are the challenges? How can we overcome it? So that is the immersive experience part of it. These are a few, again, glimpses of it. How the different analytical maps or charts have been put up so that the people can have an effective conversation. Exactly 7 minutes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Avinash. That was very insightful to see all those very concrete indicators being put together and also used in a purposeful manner. And I think it's also good to see that you have put effort into actually sharing that data and knowledge that is there, because I think that part sometimes is left a bit behind. All right, so we have our next presentation, Alvin Mejia. He's the co-team leader of the Asian Transport Observatory. So Alvin represents ATO's work and its relevance for monitoring the decade. So over to you, Alvin. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just see. So thank you very much for the organizers for having us here today. And it's my pleasure to present the Asian Transport Observatory. So essentially, for sustainable transport, really the UN decade gives us this shared direction. But to move together, we really need to have a shared way of seeing things, because what data does not reveal, decisions rarely address. We face various challenges with regards to the data: scattered evidence, inconsistent indicators, limited capacities to compare. So the task before us is just really not just about collecting more data, but it's really transforming the fragmented data information into shared intelligence so that we can move forward. As the Asian Transport Observatory, we try to contribute to the fruition of the decade. We are an initiative that is being supported and started by the Asian Development Bank. We also get support from the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. We're really trying to strengthen the knowledge base of transport in Asia and the Pacific. We have 52 economies at the national level. We have 500 more plus indicators, 460 urban centers with 250 plus indicators. We sit on policy documents, more than 1,500, with more than 12,000 lines of targets and policy measures. We look at various dimensions: infrastructure, services, sustainability dimensions relevant to the UN decade. We have focused lens on Asia, but we also situate Asia against other regions. We situate transport against other sectors. We collect national statistics, secondary data, and peer-reviewed academic resources. And we need to view transport really in a multi-scalar and a multi-dimensional manner. So just aside from the data, we are also working that the data be used and to provide a decision support service for the wider community in general. So really we're working from data to storylines, and this is what I want to do now for the various focus areas for the UN decade. In terms of access, what we estimate is that 1.4 billion of people in Asia do not have access to convenient public transport, the urban areas, and 400 million do not have access to all-season roads. The distribution charts at the right is very fascinating, because that one tells us that more than half of the urban centers, we looked at 3,600 urban centers, only have 25% of their population having convenient access to urban transport. And I think Astra also mentioned earlier the importance of knowing who may be left out and where to look at. In terms of access, we can use all these open data sets really to zoom in cities and do this at scale for the region in general. May not be perfect, but it really gives us a good sense where we should act and what we need to prioritize. We look at carbon, resilient, environmentally sustainable transport. I think Katrine also mentioned earlier that the magnitude and importance of the region in terms of transport GHGs is now unparalleled. So we have overtaken the combined emissions of North America and Europe, as per the latest numbers from the Global Emissions Database. Magnitudes also don't tell us the whole story. We're seeing trajectories are uneven when we look at transport GHGs and economic growth. So, stories about decoupling, strong decoupling, and anything in between across the region. In terms of transport and air pollution, we see the interlinkages. No? So 70% of the health-related costs globally due to transport-related air pollution is estimated to be accounted for in the region. Targeted efforts, we need to look into specific sources if we have limited resources. Heavy-duty vehicles, only 7% of the vehicle registrations, but majority of the PM2.5 and NOx emissions. We need to check and change in terms of priorities. This one is about domestic shipping emissions and how they are really contributing towards the magnitude of the emissions, the red part here in the graph. We look at resilience. This is a work that we have done with the European Space Agency. We see that around 2% of the 2% of the total road lengths for the 21 countries that are included here are exposed to flooding. And it means we've calculated around 7% of the population living within 2 kilometers of these roads. When we look at efficiency, connectivity, and logistics, what happened? Yeah. So we are generating economic value with less transport energy. We're among the lowest in the world regions when it comes to this, and we have cut down at least 3 times the amount of transport energy in producing the economic value in the last 25 years. Transport connectivity, on the left, aviation. It means just that we haven't really recovered in terms of the connectivity there since the COVID pandemic. And in terms of maritime liner connectivity, what we're seeing is a mixed picture. We have half of the countries have weak connectivity. The other one, we have some of the world's most connected economies. When we look at people-centered urban mobility, this is very interesting. This is data from Google that we've compiled. 2.7 trillion trips in that data set from 2018 to 2023. What we're seeing really is that there's massive shift from active transport towards private transport. 90% of the 300 cities that we have here losing mode shares on active transport and gaining towards private transport. This is also about disconnected street networks. A higher score means streets are more disconnected. In general, from the 1970s onwards, the cities in the region are moving towards being more disconnected. Road fatalities have been declining, but the region's still far from the targets. The challenge really is now not about sustaining progress, but really accelerating it. And it's also about connecting different data sets. So we're seeing in terms of the infrastructure ratings, the vulnerable road users are really rating the infrastructure very low. Probably skip some of the slides here. In terms of e-mobility, science and technology, we're seeing a good, shooting up in terms of the electrification in the region, but we're also seeing that we're not decarbonizing the grid emissions. And on the data side, we're looking at policies. We are looking at the very much uptake in terms of e-mobility, in terms of tech and transfer and digitalization. But what we also would like to answer is whether we are keeping pace in terms of the investment needed for these things to actually pursue. So I'd leave with that. This is the country dashboards. We are leaving the website, looking at the country dashboards for the UN Decade for Sustainable Transport, and we invite you to look into the Asian Transport Observatory.org website. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, Alvin, for sharing this this insight and all of these trends that you can see in the region. And to quote you, you said it's not about sustaining progress, but accelerating it for some of these some of these indicators like road safety, active mobility. So it's also a very important point that. So yes, do visit the Asian Transport Outlook for more information. And we're moving to our last presentation today before our interactive exercise. So last but not least, we have Maria Belén Vázquez. She's data specialist for transport and climate change from GIZ. So Belén will highlight the Transport Data Commons initiative that we already heard of a little bit from Carly, and its role in closing data gaps. So Belén, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So the last intervention, hang out with me right now. I have two comments. First, this is my first time in ADB, so a little bit nervous, but of course really engaged with the whole week. The second comment, I'm going to use, excuse me if I use your first names directly, Catherine Astra Carly Astra and Catherine. Yes, thank you very much for being here. It's really, for me, really important to see more women in these spaces, and being as a young professional, it's truly, truly, truly inspiring, and also giving me more space to keep working in a field that I really, really believe in and that has a lot of meaning for me. So yeah, I wanted to say thank you for that. And also seeing the room, I see a lot of women as well. Thank you also for all the professionals that are contributing to these topics. Okay, so going back to the presentation. My name is Belén Vázquez. I'm from GIZ. I wanted to talk to you about the Transport Data Commons initiative and how we are thinking on supporting and how are we making the effort to support the UN Decade implementation. 3 points that I will talk about. The first is the monitoring challenge, which already has been addressed, I think, by all of the speakers so far and throughout all the week. I will also want to talk about the TDC's role and what is also not the role of TDC. And then some actions that we have been implementing or doing in this last months and also throughout the work and the beginning of Transport Data Commons. So the monitoring challenge, I think this has already been addressed, and actually it's really reinforcing to see that we are all having the same pain points. Clearly this is a story that it's repeating. It's nothing new, I'm not saying anything new. The data, it's really scattered in different places. Clearly we don't share same indicators. Comparability is not easy. Many developing regions are also lacking the resources for this systematic data collection. We are not having an easy time comparing what we have and the great work that we are doing in different parts of the world. And this is where TDC comes in. It's not another monitoring system, not at all, but actually is a connective shared infrastructure. That's how we see it. We have seen already great work from Asia. Why not this work being or be able to inform what is happening in Latin America and vice versa? How does citizen-led data collection sit? Why it does not sit alongside with other big observatories, government observatories, and so on? How do we avoid reinventing the wheel? This is not needed. So. What is the TDCI's role in the UN Decade? Let me be clear. TDC does not intend to own the decade monitoring. This is just impossible. This is definitely a collective effort. What TDC provides is a data infrastructure that enables actors to monitor more effectively. And this is the TDC's commitment, providing infrastructure that makes the decade monitoring possible. Clearly, it's in the 5 enabling factors from the decade: boost data, evidence, and knowledge. We're just aligning more clearly. So not replacing efforts, enabling them, not creating silos, but rather connecting them, and not duplicating tools. We are trying to integrate them. So 3 components from the TDC. The first is the shared data infrastructure. The TDC portal makes transport data discoverable, accessible, usable. Observatories, like I said, the ATO can amplify their reach. SLOCAT, as Carly said before, it's planning on migrating the data or sharing the data in TDC. And community groups, for example, in Manila, making pedestrian data finally discoverable alongside really big, important data sets. Yesterday, I was in the Women on the Move Lounge, Filipinas, and we did a Jane's Walk. We mapped the streets. Where is this data? This is a space where we can have this information as well, share this information. The second part, the data standards. We're not inventing new ones. There is no need. We are aligning with existing best practices, FAIR principles, machine-readable data and formats, standardized data. So Latin America can actually use Asian data and not just read about it. That's the goal. And then the active community, which probably it's one of the key pillars for TDC, and happy to see also, and share, again, spaces with already faces that we're sharing spaces before even. I'm talking Geneva, I'm talking Glasgow, I'm talking London. We already been together in several tables, and that's just a reinforcement that we are doing things correct. So what we are doing right now in infrastructure and standards, we already have a robust a group of data sets that are being formatted and harmonized. We are working with international development organizations to include clauses in the terms of references so that we already have projects that are born with best practices. We're not asking anyone to abandon systems or their own platforms, their own already existing observatories, but we're asking them to make data discoverable and interoperable. On governance and community, we are really strong on inclusivity. Regional focal points right now, TDC Africa, with think tanks, TDC Latin America, with Centro de Movilidad Sostenible, universities like the Buenos Aires in Argentina. Their role is to network, to do onboarding, to amplify regional priorities. Not imposing frameworks, but rather ensuring that all the voices are heard. The third part of the third aspect is in capacity and integration. So the idea is that these focal points can also give the onboarding. We're talking train the trainers connection. Academic partnerships, we're talking here, for example, with the RIGHT program, knowing the priorities in the field so that we can prioritize and fill up the data gaps. So that when UNDESA reports, when governments benchmark, when researchers need to analyze, the data is there, it's accessible, it's interoperable. The validated community, I'm slightly out of my time, but I will wrap it up. Validated community. So here are the different logos behind the TDC. And this is actually why TDC is continuously maintaining itself in time, because this isn't one organization's project. This is actually backed up by several different organizations around the world that have this specific mandates and roles and want to do something for it. This is lastly the Glasgow Declaration that I wanted to share with you. This is not aspiration, we have commitment. Organizations already engaged, providers, publishers, collaborators, funders. We got together around 60 participants, and we signed the Glasgow Declaration, which was a specific call to action targeting governments, knowledge institutions, and the TDC itself. Again, this is not a project, this is an initiative that goes beyond that. My final point, I think it was also said by one of the speakers, you can manage what you do not measure, and if there is no measurement, we cannot transform anything. So the decade requires data, not occasionally, not scattered, not inaccessible. It's systemically, it's usable, it's open. Also inviting you to check out the portal. It's already functioning. We have a lot of data sets. Yeah, and let's discuss more about it. Thank you.
you so much, Belen, for this interesting presentation on the TDCI. I think this will be a very significant effort, or one of these significant contributions to monitoring the UN decade. And yes, thanks again for emphasizing this, not replacing efforts, enabling them, and breaking silos. Very important, all of that. So we've now heard from our distinguished speakers, so thank you all of you for these insights, for setting the scene very nicely. Now we want to hear from the rest of you. So we hope to engage in discussions through a World Cafe type of format. So if we have, yes, thank you. Yes. So we are going to sit in 3 tables. So I ask all of you to start moving. We have one table over there, which is run by Belen, who you just heard from. That table is on national needs. So we will be rotating you will be discussing with each of our facilitators. We will have one table over there on institutional considerations managed by Avinash from WRI India. And we will have one table here on closing data gaps managed by Aaron Salang from ATO. Thanks, Aaron, for also joining us here. So the objective of this exercise will be to gather shared perspectives on data and needs gaps. We're going to discuss and identify common institutional challenges in this table, how countries at different levels of capacity can strengthen data collection and use for transport and decision making. We'll discuss the value of monitoring from national perspectives. So we are very excited to hear from all of you on this. And also, this will hopefully provide input to the UN Decade development of monitoring, the development of the monitoring system. So we will be gathering insights from this discussion and taking them forward as well. So as I said, we have these 3 tables. So I would kindly now ask all participants to move to one of these tables for this discussion to move forward. So from the back, please take a seat. You can move chairs as well to ensure that you fit around each table. Don't be shy. It's going to be a very nice discussion, I'm sure. Thank you.